Good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk Maywood under the Diversity Today Media Sunday night edition. I am your host, Dr. Reggie Ratliff, and joining me is my co-host, my co-laborer in the vineyard, and expert investment advisor, Terrence Hollingsworth. Terry, good evening.
Yo, how are you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm kind of on pins and needles, not because only the election season, but because Illinois men's basketball is playing right now against Kentucky. And I don't know if they're going to pull it off. They're down by 12, 14 with 10 minutes left in the game. But I am excited about Luke Bird winning the national championship.
Well, it is Kentucky.
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I heard you. Yep. I mean, that was a big win. I didn't know he wrestled an Iowa guy, so that sucks.
Yeah, you know, it is what it is. But it was a good match. But I posted this on social media. The wrestlers of today, they don't do basic things like sprawl. Throw the wizard in, you know, when they sprawl, push down on the head. Throw the hips in when somebody throw. You should make them pay for taking bad shots. But the first thing they do is they try to grab your ankle and flip you around like you're a rag doll. I mean, they're all about scrambling, but the fundamentals, you know, they kind of gone away with this generation of wrestlers. I mean, they're truly athletic, but I mean, you got to be able to do the basics, and that's what kind of cost Gabe Stevenson, in my opinion.
Certainly.
So
certainly a different space in terms of what's going on in wrestling these days.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you real quickly before we bring in our two guests. You know, this is a big week for the market. You know, President Donald Trump is still trying to use executive order as springboards for, you know, the initiative like dismantling the Department of Education and you know, making some major changes with other federal government agencies, including the mass layoffs, furloughs or terminations, you know, that kind of thing. So how do you think that's going to impact? How do you think the week is going to look for our economy and the country?
First thing I'll say is that this is a normal market, and everybody wants to feel like, you know, all the you know, we're in trouble. We're not in trouble yet, right? Maybe the market is turning lower. Maybe we're looking at less revenues and things like this on one hand, but at the end of the day, we have to make these adjustments all the time. We don't know what the effects of these layoffs are or what they're going to be. And so, you know, we'll see. And we hope that, you know, we think overall, to be honest, the economy is still going to be okay. But we have to adjust to maybe a slower economy where people are not making as much money.
Yeah, and they didn't change the Federal Reserve rate. So maybe that's the reason why, basically what you're saying, because it's too early to panic. And hopefully that won't impact the Village of Maywood economy and some of the moves that the leadership is trying to make to push the village forward. So speaking of which, we're going to invite our two candidates, one for the Village of Maywood trustee, Miss Claudia Vandiver. I see you, Terry. Thank you, sir, as always. And we're also going to bring on our Park District candidate for Commissioner of the Park District of Maywood, Don Williams. So we'll bring both ladies on, and welcome to podcast. Welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you.
Welcome back, I should say. Welcome back. Yeah. How you ladies doing this wonderful Sunday evening?
I am doing fine.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm doing well also. Hey, Don.
Nice. So let's get down to the nitty gritty. I want to start off with Don, if I can. You know, you're an incumbent running as a write-in candidate for the Village Park District as a commissioner. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The last time you were on a podcast, which is fairly recently, you were talking about some, you know, legalities going on, and including the shutdown of the Park District for 80 some odd days. And the lack of support from the village leadership, the board, and how they are basically streamlining some of that tax revenue back to their cofer to take care of the parks that they own, they're currently running but operating but shouldn't. And I'm not sure how much you saw of Mayor Booker's interview with us this past week, but his belief is the park should be consolidated under the village leadership. What do you say about that?
Yeah, I saw that podcast where Mayor Booker stated in the 2007 referendum had expired 2 years after the referendum had passed, and that is not true. Mayor Booker is real smooth with what his words and what he says, and there's an ordinance that is on the Village of Maywood's books that states it is section 1997 code section dash 318, the ordinance 75 to 5 passed 7 10 1975, and the ordinance, and it says that the Village of Maywood continue as of June 11 2007, discontinuation of the Departments of Playgrounds and Recreation. The operation and staffing of the Department of Playgrounds and Recreation as one of the regular departments of the Village of Maywood was discontinued due to the passage of a referendum November 7, 2006, that approved the expansion of the corporate boundaries of the Maywood Park District through annexation to match the corporate boundaries of the village. The effect of the referendum is that the Maywood Park District would offer the recreational activities and operate and maintain recreational facilities for the benefit of the residents of the village. For purposes of repaying an interfaith fund loan made by the village's general fund to fund past annual budgets of the Department of Playgrounds and Recreation, the village will continue to levy approximately $200,000 per year as part of its annual property tax levy until the interfund loan is paid in full. So that is a fact. The ordinance has not disappeared; it's still in place.
Well, you read it word for word. So, does this mean that the attorneys that represent the park district will continue to fight to receive those other parks that's under the village jurisdiction at this point? What's the plan going forward?
The plan moving forward is that the Maywood Park District will continue to have the Village of Maywood comply with the wishes of the Maywood residents that voted to have the one consolidated park district. And our legal will continue to make sure that that happens. It has not expired. It's still intact, regardless of what Mayor Booker and the Village of Maywood Board of Trustees want to do is dissolve the Maywood Park District under the Village of Maywood. We're still going to continue to move forward because the Maywood residents voted in 2007. 19 years later, it still hasn't happened because the Village of Maywood doesn't want it to happen. But the Maywood residents need that to happen so that the Maywood Park District can be the one recreational and park facility, I mean, government municipality here in the Village of Maywood. Only one, not two, just one. And that needs to happen.
So, I have one final question. Certainly when Mayor Booker came into office, this referendum was still unresolved because this was 19 years ago, as you stated. My question is, why has this not been resolved over the 19-year period?
Well, I must say, when Mayor Booker was a trustee running as the mayor in 2021, it was on his campaign literature that he would do everything in his power to have the parks be consolidated under the Village of Maywood. He also had three park district candidates that ran and won their seats, and they were on our board: Dr. June Price Shingles, Jeffrey Dean Harris, and Rodney Montgomery, that stated that while they were on our board, they would do everything they could to make sure that would happen. Unfortunately, Mayor Booker has his own agenda of what park and recreation means and what it would mean to the Village of Maywood, and he's doing everything that he can to make sure that that does not happen. Putting untruths out there stating that the referendum expired, it doesn't exist, we have no choice but to consolidate into the village of Maywood. There's just a lot of variables that he is propagating in the media of why the park district needs to dissolve. And the referendum needs to be enforced, and that the Maywood Park District just do what we need to do and have one consolidated park district.
One final question: is there anything that the attorney for the park district can do, um, whether go to court or reach, have, mediator or whatever the case may be, to ultimately do the wishes of the citizens in consolidating the park under the Maywood Park District?
Yes, our legal is currently working on that. It's between our legal as well as the Village of Maywood legal. The Village of Maywood legal is at a standstill, but our legal team is moving forward to make sure that this does happen.
Thank you. I will come back to you shortly, and thank you for being transparent. Definitely reading the ordinance and just answering these questions. I don't believe in answering softball questions because the community we want transparency. So I appreciate you being transparent in this process. So I'd like to move in with Madam Claudia Vandiver. Good evening. I want to start off by asking you how your campaign is going as you run for a seat on the
Oh,
trustee.
I'm tired. I've been I've been running ragged, doing a lot of different community activism while also campaigning. I've been hosting events to educate the community about property taxes, as far as why we're being overtaxed, about the referendum issue, and then I just yesterday had a small business networking event to try and get business owners together so that we can start organizing an actual small business community. You guys did me a favor as far as helping to, let people see the video that I put out about what I believe are the main three issues in the community. But I've been working to try and do things even right now to bring those issues of high taxation, not enough small businesses, and then the lack of a grocery store to the community, so we can start working on solutions even right now. So that's what I've been doing as of late.
Absolutely. So thank you for responding. I'm sure you ladies are tired. I mean, it's been a journey. We see what you guys are doing through the media and the candidate forums that you're attending and appearing on interviews such as this podcast. So I'm sure that is very exhausting. But you are reaching the final stretch. Today is March 23rd. There are what 8 more days before election on April 1st. So as I say, finish strong, finish strong. But Madam Claudia, did you get a chance to watch our podcast, our interview with Mayor Booker and Trustee Sanchez and the other three candidates?
Yeah, of all the views, I'm probably three of them. I watched it three times as
Yeah,
so far.
the views have definitely increased over the last week. But I want to ask you if there's anything that was telling, that was disturbing as you watched that podcast as a candidate for trustee.
Well, yeah, and even not even so much as a candidate, as a citizen who goes to all of the village board meetings and watches them all, it's one thing to have been doing this for 10 years and understanding that when it comes election time, what people do while they're on the board becomes a different rendition when they're in the limelight running for office. And there were just things that were said that was not consistent with what actually occurred in the board meetings. Like for example, when Trustee Sanchez was fielding the question about the compensation issue, he said, and I quote, well, in reference to the compensation, we didn't have a choice in the matter, as far as we were not trying to give ourselves a raise. We were basically doing it for the next group of people to come in. Well, here's couple of things that were problematic. I'm the one who asked the question of the attorney because the village board was not going to tell the community that if they voted in favor of that increase, it would not take effect for all the board members at the same time. The second issue, and I'm going to repost that video of the village board meeting from the 10th of September. What they also didn't tell you is they couldn't increase their compensation during the term. In that board meeting, the attorney specifically told the board members that if you want to increase in your salary, you have to first pass the ordinance at least 180 days before the next election date, which is the 1st of April. And then if you do that, it will go into effect for the next election cycle. So in essence, the goal was to give themselves a raise, but with the understanding that they would potentially be able to retain their seats in the upcoming cycle, and then they would get a higher compensation. So that was, yeah, not really the truth.
Understood. So, you know, during the interview, Mayor Booker and Trustee Sanchez confirmed that since 2021, there have been 100 over 100 new businesses that have been started, including roughly 15 to 20 businesses opening since the beginning of this year. That has amassed over $3 million in sales in over the last 4 years, and including like Kroger and their partnership with the Joseph Business School and grants that they received that exceeded some $40 million with the expectation of $120 million coming in the near future. Not to mention the revenue stream coming in from the casino. Certainly, we can't check at this point whether the numbers are true as far as the 40 million that they received and all that kind of thing. But one thing we can say is that the village is in a deficit, and by their admission, most of it is in pension funds. But how do you see this turning? Even though they're still in deficit, even though they're receiving millions of grants for different projects through state funding, the Illinois Black Caucus, and Hampton revitalization, just the whole balance sheet as it relates to receiving revenue. How do you see that from your purview? Is that positive, or is that something that still is disturbing for you? What do you think?
Yeah, it is because there's a lot of different variables, and I'll be really succinct. First of all, when we talk about businesses, this administration is good at talking about the businesses that open. They have a bunch of different one of those big giant scissors. They have about 15 out there, so they go to the ribbon cutting ceremony and they're cutting ribbons left and right. But as a long-term business person, I know it's not about the openings, it's about how many of them stay open. Because for businesses that they talk about are opening left and right, I've seen the footprint of their predecessor that closed a couple of years ago. We also have a very high turnover rate of businesses, and business retention is very problematic. In addition to that, when I look at the spreadsheet as far as why we have a deficit, I'm going to give a very good answer. Right now, as far as revenue is concerned, based on the 2023 audit, 60% of all of the revenue is from taxpayer dollars. That's up from previously years ago where it was 58%. And then if you compare us to like Westchester, they're only dependent about 30 or ish type of percent, and that's the norm. So my question is this: we're in a deficit. We have massive overspending and mismanagement of our dollars, and then we wonder why we can't get out of it because we're spending more than we make, and that we're totally addicted and dependent upon taxpayer dollars for ends to meet. And then the last thing I want to say is this: with the current things that are happening in the federal government, where they're cutting grant money left and right, when you have a community like ours who is totally dependent on taxpayer dollars and grant money, if the grant money dries up, this village is going to turn to what to be able to make their ends meet? They're going to continue to overtax the residents.
You raise an interesting point. Sustainability or high turnover businesses have been problematic. I've seen it myself every time I come home. It seems like there's a business closing, opening, closing. Um, but also the grant funding. Maywood has for years relied on grant funding, state funding, and things of that nature. And you mentioned that the tax will remain high in comparison to the neighborhood communities, the neighborhood villages. Do you believe that the businesses that have opened over the last 4 years, or even the last year, the 15, 20, would it make that much of a difference as far as profit margin? Because these are small businesses. Um, and most of our country is ran on small businesses, like roughly 70%, but they sustain. In the village of Maywood, you assess that that's really not the case. So my question is, do you feel that the businesses that have been opening are sustainable enough to generate the profit, or have enough profit margin to make up that revenue that the taxpayers are paying? Or would they, in your estimation, fail to the point where we will have to look for other streams of income besides grants and state funding and a casino? What are your thoughts about that? That makes sense?
Oh, it definitely makes sense. And I'm going to save that part last. And I'm just going to say the village needs a job. Okay. And remind me to get back to it if I forget to explain that. But what I was going to say as far as the businesses, and this is the reason why I had the event yesterday, we have individual businesses operating as silos. Whereas you go to those other communities that are prospering, they have a business community. Okay, case in point, the reason why we can't attract the big box stores to our community is because we don't have a real strong small business community and we lack diversity. Case in point, if I want to go get some soul food or some Jamaican food, or if I want to go, maybe just go get some 25-inch yaki. Oh, we have that. But if I want to go and get an Italian meal, or if I want to go get a full body massage, I got to go outside the community. So there's nothing wrong with us having a lot of soul food restaurants and a lot of let's say fast food, chicken style restaurants. That's fine, but you need diversification so that one, you have a variety of options for the people in your community, and so you can attract outside consumers into your community to help build up your small businesses. And that's the last thing I'm going to say is that if we had a bigger small business community, then the big box stores would see the advantage of setting up shop here, and then that's going to bring a larger influx of dollars. And then the last thing, the village needs a job. I just want to clarify that. If you think about your home expense, let's say you're married and for each month your expenses are like $2,000, right? Or sorry, $3,000, but you only bring in $2,000. There's three solutions to the problem. One, get another job. Two, cut your spending. Three, do all of them. Well, if right now the village is 60% depending on our tax dollars, the village needs to get a job. They need to find an alternative source of revenue, like turning these blighted liability properties that they own into a source of income to bring in additional revenue. Open up village-owned businesses that actually, once again, helps to defer the cost off of the back of modern-day taxpayers, and then at the same time brings them extra revenue. Get a job, Maywood.
Very well put. I want to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to ask a question to both you ladies. Mayor Booker talked about a feasibility study, which is fair. I mean, you want to assess how the community is doing in terms of planning. I surmise that you need some type of strategic plan, which is a big picture of short and long-term needs for the village. But he believes that a feasibility study is necessary before doing a comprehensive study or a strategic plan. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different vision as you come into office? Because there haven't been a strategic plan since 2013. There's none published since 2013. And I know Terry pointed out that Broadview just posted theirs recently. So what's your take on that?
I think we've kind of lost sight of the purpose of a feasibility plan. Okay, like for example, PT Man just had a candidates forum, and they used the saying, "Where there is no vision, there'll be no provision." Okay, I go to Rock of Ages, too. So my whole point is this: before you can do a feasibility, because that's just what it is, it sees whether it's not as feasible. You first have to have a plan. If you went to the leadership right now and said, okay, here's the taxation problem, tell me what your definitive plan is. The mayor mentioned about Joseph School of Business and about the Cook County Land Bank. But what's the plan? Before you can say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and have that site tested and that site randomly tested in other communities where they're trying to build, like before Bolingbrook got built up, they first had a specific plan for what they wanted to do. And then if I say, okay, at the corner of, Fifth Avenue and Washington, we want to make that a medical district, you first have to draw out and figure out what kind of medical facilities you want, and then look and see whether or not it would be feasible to make it happen. But if you don't have a vision, you just throw a darts at a wall to pretty much see what sticks, and that's never going to get the desired result. You first have to have a plan, and right now they don't have a plan, and if so, it's top secret. They're not telling us, and that's not good.
We believe that God has given us the vision to be compassionate Christians who are empowered by Christ to reach beyond the walls of the church building to meet the holistic needs of our community. It's amazing. I still remember that. And it's been some years since I've been here in the DMV. But where there's no vision, there's no prosperity. Where there's no vision, the Bible says people should perish because of lack of vision. And I wholeheartedly agree with you.
Sorry, no, because I'll just interject that, real quick, and then definitely Don. We're not neglecting you. We'll get to you, back to you. No, but but what I was going to say is that, just a FYI, my dad told me from the age of 4, I knew I was going to be a doctor. He kind of dismissed me because we'd never had doctors in our family and whatever. But during the hard times, during the racism, all the things that I basically went through, the only thing that kept me going is the fact that I couldn't see myself being anything else. I heard people in my mind calling me Dr. Vandiver before I came on, and that's the way it has to be. You have to have people with vision who can see what Maywood can be, and then have the tools to be able to make it happen.
Word to the wise. Definitely great point. And this is for both you ladies. There's that story about Walt Disney. When he was building Walt Disney World, he died before the project ended. And the story goes that there's a construction worker who was having a conversation and said, it's a shame that Mr. Disney died before this park came to fruition. This theme park came to fruition. But the other person said, no. He did see this coming. It was his vision. We're building this theme park based on his vision. And now you have the vision, you have to put the work in, of course. So, and Don, you and I sat on the board in the past, we talked about that. We talked about vision with, the late Madam Karen Yarbrough and, former mayor, Mr. Yarbrough, Henderson Yarbrough, and others that was on the board at that time. And we talked about vision. You talked about the vision when you first was elected to the Maywood Park District. And you wanted to grow. You want to have services for the youth as well as the seniors. And so, here we are in 2025, and you're jumping over hurdles like you're a track star just to try to get some things going. So, as you preview what's happening during your 2 terms as a commissioner of the Park District, what do you see yourself doing going forward after this election, should you win?
So that's interesting that you said that we've jumped over a lot of hurdles. It has been a very taxing process. It's a volunteer position. I don't get paid for this, but serving in the community is a job that I love to do, and I do it wholeheartedly. Within the upcoming future of the Maywood Park District, we are definitely planning on adding onto our campus to accommodate the needs here of the Maywood residents by creating a full court gym system, as well as additional recreational indoor facilities, so that we can meet the needs of our Maywood residents. We host, and within the past 3 months, upwards of 45 repasts, because I understand that there's a lot of churches around us that don't offer repast services for their members. So where do they come? They come to the park district because we're able to provide that type of service. We also have a lot of landscaping, beautifications, as well as partnership with our green spacing, having agricultural initiatives that we're going to be partnering with a lot of different organizations. So there's going to be a lot of service, hands-on, community-oriented projects that we're going to be having at the Maywood Park District, as well as establishing the Friends of the Park and advisory councils of the Senior Advisory Council, as well as the Youth Advisory Council, as well as having committees on our board in our community, and to have them be part of our board at the Maywood Park District. So there's going to be a lot of things that's going to come up, as well as we're expecting to receive all of our parks and the facilities, and then we could be able to offer more services to our Maywood residents.
And you'll be able to provide more service because that revenue, the tax revenue that's to the village, will be reallocated to the park district. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because right now our budget, we're sitting on a $685,000 budget at the Maywood Park District. We have the smallest budget out of all the governing municipalities here in our Maywood community, including the village of Maywood, the library district, and both school districts. So, and everybody's like, well, what about this? How come you all can't do this? We can accommodate what we can within our means because we are not getting that additional revenue that the village of Maywood has been holding on to. And over the years, it has been stated by the previous village manager, Mr. Willie Norfleet. He said it at a meeting that we had with the senator that a lot of the tax revenue that they receive for recreation has been used in other departments, and it didn't go to recreation. So like when Mayor Booker is stating that the village put money into rehabbing their own parks, for over 20 plus years, they didn't renovate the parks. They just recently now, but they've been getting that revenue every year, whereas the Maywood Park District has not been receiving that revenue.
Okay, so I have one more question. Well, I have another question for you, Madam Dawn. So the mayor stated that the village manager's salary is about $140,000 a year. However, the executive director's annual salary is about $110,000 a year. That is roughly that's a pretty big chunk of that $685,000 annual budget, right? Is that true that they make $110,000?
That is not true. Our executive director does not make $110,000. His salary is probably around $80,000, and our executive director Rod Cheney has over 40 plus years of park and recreational experience, as well as a master's degree in park and recreation. So he has the credentials that backs up his experience. But as far as him having $110,000 salary, that Mayor Booker likes to throw numbers out there, that is not correct.
Where would Mayor Booker get that number from?
We have two commissioners on our board that are not Maywood residents that we've been trying to get off the board for the past ever since September. And I think since they've been sitting on our board, they probably, put the numbers together and stated that this is what he's actually getting.
So why can't you get those two members off the board if they are not meeting residency requirements? And who are those two people?
That would be Jeffrey Eaton Jr. and Jeremiah Brownlee. It was brought to our attention in September 2024 that Jeremiah Brownlee lives in Chicago. His address is a Chicago address. He voted in the 2023 election for Chicago. And our attorney brought it to his attention, as well as Jeffrey Eaton, when they both filled out their applications January 19, 2024. They both stated that they lived in the village of Maywood. And when they were sworn in, they signed the oath of office. September 2024 was when our attorney brought it to our attention. She has copies of their driver's license. She has copies of their voting registration. She has copies of their business applications. And all of those documentation says that they are not legal Maywood residents prior. And the requirement for the Maywood Park District is that you have to be a Maywood resident 1 year prior to your appointment. So they were appointed as of March of March 9th, 2024. So they had to have been a Maywood resident, lived in the village of Maywood, March 9th, 2023. So they have been committing fraud by impersonating elected officials. So we have a 5-member board. 3 members have to vote to have a hearing. Our third commissioner, which is Daryl Bass, refused to vote to have a hearing, refused to vote for them to produce documents to show that they are legal Maywood residents. As of September the 5th, Jeffrey Eaton updated his Maywood address he updated his address to a Maywood address. So what did you update it from, in order for it to be updated to a Maywood address if you were already registered here in the village of Maywood? So this has been an ongoing issue ever since September, all the way up until now. At our board meetings, our attorney has asked, can they please show documentation? They refuse. They refuse to show documentation. They refuse to provide documentation.
Is there another step that you could take that's above the village level, like to the
We've reached
state?
out. Yes, we've reached out to the state's attorney's office as well as the attorney general's office. The Maywood Park District is anticipating on having an upcoming press conference within the next week, where we're going to put all that information out, and that is hopefully that will allow the state's attorney's office and attorney general's office to be able to step in and say, hey, look, these individuals need to be removed off the board.
There was a question online by actually candidate Vernica Smith. She asked if it appears to her and maybe others that Mayor Booker didn't appear interested in turning over the parks at all. I think we talked about this a little earlier by him wanting to consolidate the parks under the village leadership. But how do you plan on getting the parks back?
So that was going to be something left up to our board and our attorney, our legal, because right now we see that the village of Maywood has no intention on transferring, complying with the Maywood residents' wishes of what they voted on to have those parks be transferred over. So I know that there's an election coming up, so we have to see what the makeup of the village of Maywood board is going to be, as well as the Maywood Park District board. But right now there are things in place legally for our attorney to be able to continue on making sure that that does happen, that the parks that the village of Maywood are managing will be transferred over, as well as the facilities will be transferred over to the Maywood Park District.
Thank you for answering that question. And by the way, Vernica Smith is also a candidate for the Park District, Maywood Park District.
Yes,
You are watching Let's Talk Maywood on Diversity Today Media. I have Ms. Dawn Williams and Ms. Claudia Vandiver. Ms. Vandiver is a candidate for trustee of the village of Maywood, and Ms. Williams running for re-election as a writing candidate for the Maywood Park District. This question is for both of you ladies. The sports complex seems to be a topic of conversation. It reminded me of a huge park. There's a huge sports complex, I believe, in Romeoville or Aurora, I think, where it has like 8 basketball courts and a whole bunch of athletic, opportunities for people who are in Aurora and from outside the Aurora area. And I can only imagine how many millions of dollars they receive in revenue from leasing out, games and practices and, tournaments, things like that. What is your view on having a sports complex in the village of Maywood, I guess, adjacent to the public library? I'll start with you, Ms. Williams.
So once again, that was a plan that our Park District Board and previous executive director came up with back in 2018, when Mayor Booker was a trustee, and in our facilities every day, our executive director at the time shared that vision with him, and so now he's taking it off as his own. What our plan was that we would partner with District 89 and have the facility right off of the expressway in between where the old Comcast building is, going all the way down to 15th and Harrison. So from 13th and Harrison all the way to 15th and Harrison, due to the proximity next to the expressway, as well as that area over there does not have any recreational opportunities that the Maywood residents would be able to access. So, and we understood that that would bring in much revenue directly to the Maywood Park District, as well as bringing industry here to the village of Maywood because of its proximity to both expressways right off of Ninth Avenue and 17th Avenue. So that was an idea by our Maywood Park District Board, once again, and our previous executive director, that Mayor Booker just took it off as his own and he wants to put it over there by the library. I don't think that that's a great idea because of that land. It's sinking over there where the police station is, and also with the parking. And then you've got the two train stations. I mean, the trains where it's always a standstill of traffic. So if you got people going in that area patronizing it, it's going to be a crawl of traffic in both directions. So our plan was to partner with District 89 and to have it right off of Harrison, where that would be better service the Maywood residents in that area that don't have access to recreational opportunities.
I'm just trying to wrap my mind around parking alone. And I'm not sure if you ladies had an opportunity to go to that sports complex in Aurora, but it's huge. And so with that comes the demand for parking spots. And just looking at the that land that's next to the library, yeah, it'll be tight. It'll be a real tight fit. So Harrison, which is next to the expressway, down that stretch is, yeah, definitely ideal. Miss Claudia, what's your thoughts about that as far as sports complex?
No, I agree, especially somebody with experience with renovation and contracting. You're going to have a sports center that's probably going to have a pool and water next to a train line. If a tornado hits or whatever, you know, do you want water that close to a train line? Not to even mention, like you were talking about, having a point of ingress and egress to be able to get out, and then it just does not make sense. And then I'm not for having to reinvent the wheel. If we already have properties that can be repurposed and made into a sports complex, or even, a sports type of facility, like for example Bolingbrook. I grew up in Bolingbrook. At one point in time there was something called a wave pool. That's before wave pools were known. Bolingbrook had one of the first wave pools. Well, after that became a fad, and over the years they repurposed that into an ice skating ring. So that's why I said we need people who can see beyond where we are and reimagine the different spaces. But just like Dawn said, I could definitely understand why Harrison would be a better option. But then where are you going to get the money for it? You got to have the money before you start doing feasibility studies. If not, you're just wasting money. So yeah, I'm in agreement with Dawn on that one.
Okay. Madam Claudia, do you feel that with the progress that's been made, even opening businesses and things like that, that goes into maybe a slight increase of employment, maybe perhaps a decrease in crime and opportunities for youth to work summer jobs and things like that? Do you believe that Mayor Booker should receive all of the accolades for this, or is this something that was going to happen whether he was in the seat or not? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I think it's a misconception that if elected to the board, I would really try and spearhead the notion that it's about one person. For the board, we need to be not one strong mayor. We need to be 7 board members strong. For the park district, we need to be 5 board members strong. I think of it as when we're voting, we need to be figuring out how to elect a dream team, because one person can't do everything. During a September 23rd meeting that Booker, or Mayor Booker, called to kind of quell the outrage of residents, he made a case on all the different things that he did. But during that meeting, a resident asked a question. They said, "Okay, you say you do all of these different things. Can you potentially have other board members pick up the slack and do those things?" Mayor Booker said, "Yeah, but we got trustees who don't do anything." To me, that's a leadership problem. That means you're taking on not just your job, other people's job, which is a problem with delegation. And then the last thing I want to do is to make an apples and apples comparison, because in order for him to justify his salary, he compared himself to the full-time mayor in Broadview and the full-time mayor in Bellwood. But he didn't compare himself to the full-time or the part-time mayor in Forest Park who makes 30,000, or he didn't compare himself to the mayor in Westchester who makes 15,000. I mean, I have the real numbers that I went ahead and FOIA'd to show the salaries, and you didn't even, you fought against actually even doing comparables, meaning, and I'll be real brief. During the September 10th meeting, when this issue came up, Trustee Brandon, and I think in a later meeting, Trustee Jones both made the point of, why are we rushing to do this? Why don't we send it through the Fiscal Accountability Committee? Why don't we get comparables? And it was shot down. So to now say that this is salaries that are earned when you definitely are not giving a salary that's comparable to what that job pays in other communities that are in similar type situations or even doing better than us. That was a money grab. I'm sorry, it was.
Well, thank you very much for being transparent and honest and breaking down some of the numbers. That's very important. I think the viewers should know this, as this determination about whether the village should keep its managerial form of government, which is what it is now, or switch to the strong mayor form of government. What is your stance on that, Ms. Claudia?
Well, my thing, it goes back to what it is, meaning it's not a governmental problem as far as the structure, it's the people who are in the government. Because, like we've been talking about, you can have a strong mayor, and if that strong mayor does not have the good intentions, we're going to have a bunch of problems. This is a leadership problem. When you look at the board, it's due to the fact, and you see it right now, even in the campaign trail, they're clicking up by different parties. And instead of them using a party to get on the board, they use that as an unhealthy alliance that once we get on the board, we got to get those 4 votes. And once we get those 4 votes, we control the board, versus to have strong leadership that makes sure everybody's functioning as a team player and everybody is on the same page, that it's not about a political agenda, it's about the people. So I don't care about changing the form of government. The reason why it's not working is because the people who are in our government are dysfunctional. And I'll be honest, I can't even come up with the words, but it's basically just a battle royale. And for people right now who are going to the polls, by voting for one political faction over another, you're just pouring gasoline on a fire. We need individual, most qualified people in those seats who are serious about doing the work of the people.
Would you say that the leadership? Would you say that the leadership at the mayor's position is inept, or you said dysfunctional, or is it run amok? What's your view on that?
Well,
and I only ask this question because there's this, because that in addition to what you said, we talk about the legal matter. Thank you. We talk about the legal matters. We talk about unilateral decisions of hiring a village manager, and that costs the taxpayers. And you mentioned that him solely took the credit for opening the businesses and these projects that's taking place and all this. So what is your position on all that? Is that still your word? Dysfunctional, inept?
It's dysfunction all the way around. And I hate to be like a preachy person, like some people, oh God, 2 Corinthians, everything is Bible. But, the point is this, the head sets the tone for the body. The purpose of us having a village president, and I don't believe the president on board is more powerful than everybody else, but you have a role. You're supposed to lead by example. But if the leader themselves is in the fight, if the leader themselves is perpetuating the dysfunction, then can you understand why the body is in utter chaos? We don't have sound, non-biased, just leadership that can put ego to the side. And truth be told, against ego, and they're amongst the bunch that are willing to say, listen, okay, like you were saying in the last interview you did with Maywood together, you can agree to disagree, that's fine. but we have to focus on the objective. But unfortunately, all our board meetings end up he, they won't, he, and nothing gets done. So we need a level of maturity and professionalism and a respect for the position that you're holding. And that's missing. It's missing. And I stand on that. We don't have it.
Thank you for that.
And that's across
I
the
actually
board.
have one more question. Thank you. I
Mhm.
have just one more question. I'm going to ask the final questions with Ms. Dawn. Mayor Booker said this, and Trustee Sanchez, acknowledged it, as well as the other candidates from the Maywood Together Party, that his first term was a learning process. There are some things that he had to, learn on the fly, or just trying to learn the processes of being the mayor, the demands of being the mayor. But he says, should he win the election, he will be more forward thinking. He will have more, larger projects at hand that's going to generate revenue, decrease the burden from the taxpayers, and then address the other issues such as the park district. Do you think that this was an apprenticeship, should have been an apprenticeship for him in his first term, or do you think he's behind the eight ball? Like, what's your thought as we go toward in this election cycle?
I could just go by my own personal experience. I've been involved in the Maywood Park District ever since 2007, going to the board meetings and educating myself on village government, how village government is operating, how is it structured, what everyone's key roles are. So with Mayor Booker coming in, as this being his first term, you can see what happened in the early years compared to the later 2 years of his 4-year term. Whereas it's always been, unfortunately, me, myself, and I. It used to be a newsletter that would have village departments that would give input on what's going on at the village of Maywood. We don't even see that. We have no idea what's going on at the village of Maywood at the departments until you go up there and utilize their services. So also, even at the village board meetings, with the department heads that are attending at the board meetings, they got to get permission to speak if a trustee is asking a question, or they don't want to say the wrong thing because you don't know if your job is going to be in jeopardy if you do say the wrong thing. So that's not a real good perception of the village as a whole. But like Claudia just said, it starts off at the leadership and at the top. And that's what the perception has been. Actually, that's the reality of how it has been.
Understood. Ms. Claudia, the same question for you.
Well, like I said, I think, and I want to make it clear, I'm not bashing or attempting to bash, Mayor Booker, because I see positive. At the beginning, I actually voted for him in the last election. And even now, I'm trying to figure out where my votes are going to lie. But a concern that I have, like I said, is with the political factions, because it's just not Booker's faction. There's usually two major factions on the board. I don't believe either one of them should be running the board. And I feel that so long as we continue to put fuel on the fire by putting people who align themselves in these parties on the board, rather than finding individuals who are skilled in certain skill sets and bring something to the board, you're not going to be able to get unification, and it's always going to be us against them. So until we can get people who are really serious about doing the right thing and really just leadership that's non-biased and that's going to treat everybody fairly, then unfortunately we're going to continue to have the drama, because somebody's going to be going for somebody's neck, and it's enough foolishness. So we need to find people who are willing to work for us, not work against each other.
Thank you. As a village board leader, Ms. Claudia, and I know we're running down to our last few minutes, you've seen the turnaround in Bolingbrook, for example. You mentioned Bolingbrook. Bowden Road has that outdoor mall, which looks great. It looks great. That was a huge turnaround for their economy. And then I mentioned earlier about Aurora, building the sports complex, huge turnaround. We see, Mayor Thompson doing great things in Broadview, and of course, Mayor Harvey doing great things in Bellwood. And with the exception of the Broadview mayor, we've had Mayor Thompson and Mayor Harvey, and of course, Mayor Booker on our podcast. So we think about not having a grocery store. When you think about having other types of businesses, as you mentioned, diversification of other businesses. As a village leader, should you be elected, how would you move Maywood forward economically? And remember, you work with other trustees, and of course, the mayor who will be in that seat. What makes you stand out from the rhetoric that's already been out there for the last 4 years?
Well, put it like this. I'm ready day one. I already know when the next board meeting is going to be. That's going to be the preview to our budget. I already know that's what's on the April agenda, even before they put out the agenda. So my first measure would be able to figure out where our finances are, because we can't do anything without that. So figuring out what a real budget, I feel that there's a lot of bloatation in the budget, even at the board level. They've been giving themselves undue increases in their training budget of $60,000. So we got to cut the excess spending, and then we have to take stock of village property. If we have all these parcels of village-owned properties that are currently costing us money, let's figure out who owns what, and let's figure out how to turn those liabilities into assets. And then from there, we in the meantime should be planning what we imagine Maywood to look like. And then economically, this is the biggest thing. When we plan the budget, if we're going to plan a budget for 35 million, we need to set a goal to come in at 34 million. And then we need to get quarterly reports of where we are to make sure we're on target. And if halfway through the year we're over budget, we got to cut spending. So we need financial accountability and responsibility and transparency. And that's where I'll start. I'll be the first one to make that happen.
So follow up, would you, and this question is also for you, Dawn, but Ms. Claudia, with that said, you mentioned like quarterly reports. Would you hire a CPA firm, or would you hire a consulting firm to not manage the financials, but just to be able to look at what's projected versus what's actual and determine whether it's favorable or adverse in terms of sales revenue and expenses, the liabilities that you're talking about? Would you hire a consulting firm, or would you wait to see how everyone input looks like?
Yeah, initially, because Lanya Satchel is our finance person, at least last time I checked. So I would start with her. I would see, because at one time Lanya used to come and give different reports, but that went by the wayside. So I would get with us initially to see what kind of numbers we have. And then if we're not getting the type of financial reports that allows us, like I'll give us like 3 months to see what it is, what our numbers look like. But then if not, we already use Baker and Tilly for our annual audits. Maybe we can just continue doing business with them, and they can go ahead and go into this venture of giving us actual specific numbers and giving us a trajectory, or pretty much telling us where we are along the year so we can make the necessary changes. But we work with Baker Tilly now, so maybe we can just add that as an additional service moving forward.
It's good to know. I would like to see that. I would like to see that person. I'm sure the public. Yeah, good job. Good job. Same question for you, Madam Don. The Park District is in a deficit to the tune of, I think, $250,000. How do you plan to resolve that? And is that correct, or am I off of my numbers?
I'm sorry, Reggie. We're in a deficit of $225,000, and we're already working on steps to be able to correct that. Our Park District board, there's a new board that's coming on. So, because my previous board, ever since September, refused to vote to hire a CPA accounting service to be able to get our books in order and to be able to get our reporting done, so that we could be off of the state do not pay list for our grant funding. So that's the first thing that we need to do, is to be able to hire a CPA so that we can get our financial reports conducted and finalized and finished, as well as submitted to our grant partners, our funding partners, and our state agencies that have been waiting for us to get these reports done. But unfortunately, the board has not voted to be able to hire a CPA. So from the election, once we get the new board sworn in, then hopefully those individuals will make the right decisions that need to happen in order to move our park district forward. But that would be the first thing that we would need to do, is hire a CPA so that we can be able to get a handle on our finances and get those reportings done that needed to have been done, for the past 8 months that we haven't been able to get those done due to a board vote.
Yes, just for clarification, I said should have said up to $250,000, which is $250,000, but you're just short of the $250,000 deficit. $225,000 is still a lot if you consider that's like almost like 1/3 of your overall budget of $685,000. That's a lot. So thank you for your clarification and clearing that up. So again, this is Let's Talk Maywood podcast on Diversity Today Media. There's another comment from Ms. Smith. She's been to the meeting. She's heard the commission ask for a financial report, and your requests have been turned down. Is that correct, Ms. Dawn? You've asked for financial reports, but you haven't received them?
So that was at a meeting, and what they were asking for was a copy of what was in our bank and what was our in our bank accounts and that type of financial report. And based off of what the legal stuff that is going on and what the two commissioners that are on our board that are not legally Maywood residents, there's certain financial information that was not presented because then it would be given to outside individuals that be able to use that against the Maywood Park District. So that's what was going on at that meeting. And that individual that was asking for it is not legally a Maywood resident. So why would you want to give someone access to your financial information that they could use that as a tool against you that they have been utilizing as a tool against you for the past 8 months? So that's not the type of reporting that we're talking about. What we needed to happen, if they were really about conducting board business, they would have voted for us to get the CPA so that we could get our actual financial reports done for the state controller's office so that we could be off of the do not fund list.
But do you provide financial reports during the board meeting? If any kind of, like if you, how does that look?
We are supposed to. That is underneath the umbrella of our executive director. But at that time, we don't have a CPA. We don't have an accountant on hand. So who would have that information would be our executive director. So right now, my board is dysfunctional, and our executive director is in charge of handling a lot of the board business as well as the park and recreational business as well as the day-to-day operations because we don't even have staff. Due to the inconsistency, it is a lot. So to demand, yes, you all need to do this, we don't have any staff. So how do you expect the services to be provided if we don't have that staff person to get it done?
Indeed.
So intentionally.
Right. Well, the financial aspect is kind of important. I mean, that's like the lifeline of any organization.
Yes, it is. I agree. But we're in a unique situation, especially with this board that we have right now. It's only Commissioner Rice, myself, and Commissioner Daryl Bass that are actually board members. The other two are still considered board members, but we know that they're not legal Maywood residents. So if you have a third commissioner who is refusing to make decisions that will benefit our park district, what are you supposed to do? We're in a unique situation right now. So it's like we're winding down to the.
Mr. Sykes asked the question of can the park district afford a CPA or even just an accountant, a small CPA firm to provide the service, just at a basic level?
Yes, they can. Yes, they can, because our executive director has came up with a strategic plan as well as a plan for the park district and a budget. So that is included in the budget because right now we have an actual budget that is correct to our finances that we currently have at hand. And he has that as part of his plan to hire a CPA firm to handle the finances of the Maywood Park District.
Okay. All right. Well, this takes us to the end of our interview. I want to thank both of you ladies for coming on and discussing your main points and to clear up some things for that matter. I certainly wish you both the best for the remainder of this election season. And as always, I would like to give you the opportunity to provide closing thoughts. And I'd like to start off with Ms. Williams.
So yes, I am an incumbent. I have completed 2 6-year terms of the Maywood Park District Board. I would like to continue my journey as a Park District Commissioner for another 6 years. Please write me in. I am a write-in candidate. I am asking for your support, and I have a proven track record of success with getting projects being conducted and done within the Maywood Park District. So please vote for me as a write-in candidate for a 6-year term for the Maywood Park District. I would like to continue to serve as I have been a public servant in the past 18 and 25 years in the village of Maywood. So please allow me the opportunity to be able to continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dawn. And see, like Miss Claudia,
Yeah, I'm here.
are you there? Okay, please. All right, by all means, please go ahead.
Okay, yeah, real
Oh,
brief. So,
don't hang up. Don't hang up. Please. Don't hang up after your closing thoughts. Okay.
okay, no worries.
Thank
Yeah, so long story short, I thank you for the opportunity to come on here. And I just want to say this not just for myself. If you want to know more about me, I went through the trouble of creating a website, Vandiver number 4 trustee.com. And the reason why is it's one thing in this political campaign system to just tell you a little bit, but I want people to get a chance to really know what I stand for. So on my website, there's videos, frequently answered questions, because like I said, in campaign season, we're seeing the candidate's representative, and you really need to find out what the candidates really represent, who they are. So I want to give you guys the opportunity to really get to know me, because I'm going to fight for my community. I love Maywood, and when you really love something, you fight for it. So I thank everybody for listening to my little spiel, and I'm hopeful and prayerful that I win, but punch 14 if you want an independent thinker such as myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Claudia Vandiver and Madam Dawn Williams for coming on tonight. The financial aspect of any business is a lifeline of that business. If you are in a negative, you are insolvent, which means you're bankrupt. This has been the case for the Maywood Park District and the village of Maywood. Understanding that moves have been made to resurrect the budget, to resurrect the finances of the village of Maywood. But if you have independent thinkers who don't think collectively, you're going to continue with the same problems, whether you start 100 businesses or 1,000 businesses. If there's no sustainability, if there's no strategic plan, you'll have the cycle of failure over and over again. For you see, there's a difference between rhetoric and substance. Rhetoric is when you talk the talk, but you don't walk the walk. A person who has substance, they walk the talk, plain and simple. As in the case of the village, as well as the Maywood Park District, which is also insolvent. My hope and my prayer, as a former Maywood resident who grew up in Maywood, who was able to frequent the park districts every summer and through baseball and beyond, I hope and pray that you come together and find a solution. And if anyone does not, is not the person to be on the board through residency, they should not be on the board. They should be removed. And I hope and pray that the village of Maywood get together. And as I said in the last podcast, you may disagree, but you shouldn't be disagreeable. I am Dr. Reggie Ratliff. Tune in for our next podcast. We'll bring in our next guest, more than likely a candidate. But until then, I encourage you to increase the 15% voter turnout that's been historical in Maywood. And if you really, really care about your community, if you really care about this community, the Village of Eternal Light, get up, get out, and vote. April 1st is voting date. Like us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube. God bless you. Be safe and good night.